So welcome everyone to our fourth webinar in the learning journey, Regenerating the Earth Through Collapse. As a quick reminder, we have 5 webinars, 5 cycles of these 2 weeks of sessions, and then we shift into immersive experiences. And then we come back for phase 2 of the learning journey with another 10 weeks of these 2-week cycles, so 5 cycles. And so what that means is that this is our 4th of 5 webinars in the first part. And the way that we named it at the beginning is the first half of the online part of this learning journey is about laying the groundwork. And then the second half is about case studies, real world experiences, design practice. But you can see that we are really loose with our categories here. In that we're really showing the way into design practice every step of the way in the first half as well. And so what I want to do today is bring us deeper into the strategy that we've been developing in this learning journey and show how we are putting it into practice and how you can participate in it immediately and directly with things that we have planned and that are coming up. And then I want to be able to kind of zoom in and zoom out to near-term actions in the coming few weeks and months, and long-term actions, things that can unfold over the next several years. And the focus of what I want to talk about today is a question that comes up a lot, not necessarily in these webinars, but generally in the discussion of social change, which is how much should we try to protect and defend and minimize harm in the old system, and how much should we proactively step away and birth the new system? And specifically, what is the role of political activism? Because political activism has taken on a meaning in today's world that is increasingly unhelpful. I would say that it has been intentionally framed to disempower us. And so what I want to do is invite us into a deeper and older understanding of activism. So it's not like I'm naming something new, I'm just naming something really important for what it means to design during a time of collapse. So if we're going to design during collapse, we need to know how to navigate between the dying world and the world that's trying to be born. And that's a place where there are a lot of really important and really difficult choices that we have to make. And so what I want to share today is how to choose the birthing of the new world. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't value the importance of activism in the old world. It's just that, first of all, I personally am not there anymore. I'm not trying to hold up and keep the old world going. I'm completely, in my own life, devoted to birthing the new world. But also, I increasingly feel like there are pathologies in participating in the old world as it breaks down further. The more it breaks down, the less effective it is to do things in the old world. And that is part of this collapse awareness to collapse acceptance journey, is what can we grieve and let go and accept, and what do we need to hold on to because it's still precious. And so you see, there are very difficult choices in that place. And so what I want to do today is lay out for us a differentiation between 2 ways of thinking about activism, and then connect it to what we're doing in this learning journey and what we're doing with the Dandelion Strategy. And there's going to be one point where Penny is going to share. Again, I'll be the primary presenter today, and then Penny will have her part. And then we'll have some discussion afterwards, and this will also move us into the community calls coming up later this week. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation and jump right in. So the title that I've given to today's webinar is Dandelion Seeds in Action. So we're talking about this dandelion strategy, but how do we put it into action? And then I have the subtitle, I believe this is true, that now is the time for revolutionary activism. So I want to explain what activism is in birthing the new world and what it means to be a revolutionary. Because normally in our militarized Western world, at least, revolutionary means engaging in war. And there's a better way than that. So I want to start by saying part of what's happening right now is that all of us are experiencing a breakdown of the stories that we live in. And that includes our social identities. So, for example, I might be a professional, like I'm a research scientist, or I'm a banker, I'm an elementary school teacher, whatever the story is, that with the changes happening in the world, those stories break. And when those stories break, our identities break with them. And so we need to ask ourselves continually, who am I now? What role am I taking on now? What story am I living in this moment of what is breaking down around me? And in those moments, it can be quite confusing. So it's helpful to have some clarity. And what I want to do is offer one kind of clarity. There are many others for how we can design in the time that is between worlds. Zachary Stein, for those of you who know his work, talks about designing education or being human in the time between worlds. And I'm really following in the footsteps of that kind of thinking here. So first of all, there's activism in the old world. And here the old world is the world that's dying. And because capitalism has captured so much of that old world, we're basically only given three choices. Activism in the old world is mostly pointless and ineffective protest. 10 million people show up to No King's Day in the United States, and then the very next day, the same old system continues as before and nothing has changed. The protest dynamic no longer is a mechanism that organizes for the transformation of a system. So protest is something that is increasingly unhelpful and ineffective. Also, there's voting. You're always welcome to vote for the stooge on the left or the stooge on the right, as long as you accept that the electoral system that's completely corrupt and bought by the plutocrats, that they're the ones giving you the choices and who you can vote for. So we have highly dysfunctional democracies and very corrupt electoral systems, but you're welcome to vote in it if you want to. It's not really going to change anything, but have fun. And then, of course, be a good capitalist. You can always buy better products, still make money for those investors. Be sure you keep the economy going. Go buy your electric car. Go buy your gas, your light bulbs, whatever. Be a good green consumer, as long as you're a consumer. Because the discourse of capitalism, and especially neoliberal capitalism, has made us all into consumers. So mostly activism in the old world means one of those three things. That's what people are invited to do, and it's profoundly disempowering. So what is activism in the new world? The activism that gives birth to the new world, and I'm going to describe it in three parts. One, walk away. Stop participating in that dying system. Stop giving it all of your energy. Stop doom scrolling about Trump. Stop posting the 1200th time some kind of petition about what's happening in Gaza. Walk away from the distraction machine, which doesn't mean you don't care about what's going on, but just recognize that your actions aren't very useful there. And start dreaming the new into being. What would be a better way to organize ourselves if it's not nation states? What would be a better way to govern if it's not multinational corporations? What is the better way to educate if it isn't an industrial model of making people economic wage slaves? What would it look like to dream the new into being? And begin right now to live different stories. Live stories of the future. Live stories for where we're going. Stop living stories for what we're going away from. And you can see that activism in this way can feel profoundly different, much more empowering, invigorating, nurturing, healing, fun, beautiful. And so what we want to do is move toward this revolutionary form of activism. So what does it mean to think like a revolutionary? Notice I don't have any pictures of someone with a gun, rising up against a military state here, because here I'm thinking of revolutionary in a semantic or spiritual sense. People who change the fundamental paradigms of how we think about our reality. Revolutionaries are people who deconstruct the mainstream narratives. They create different paradigms. and they compost the old to give birth to the new. I have 5 examples here, and there are plenty more. Charles Darwin showed us a very different way of thinking about biology and the natural intelligence of the universe. Also, less well known, Charles Darwin argued for universal human psychology, which means he was strongly opposed to racism. He did not believe that Black people had lower IQs than white people. He was like, there's no evolutionary basis for that. So Charles Darwin was both a social and a scientific revolutionary. Let's not forget Jesus. Jesus, the person who criticized the corrupt temples, who later became the poster child of corrupt temples through the manipulation of stories, but the real Jesus invited women to worship next to men and challenge the social norms of his time. What about the Buddha? The Buddha who saw all of the inequality and suffering from his elite position in the palace, and he left the palace to find a path that transcends suffering by deconstructing how the mind creates an understanding of the world. That's truly revolutionary. And then this woman here with her hand on her cheek, that's Lynn Margulis. Lynn Margulis, who showed us that the majority of evolutionary strategies are cooperative and not competitive. She gave us symbiogenesis, the way that bacteria can collaborate to create complex cells. And then from there, symbiogenesis of the planet, the basis of an ecological understanding of the entire Earth. And then here on the right is Donella Meadows, a systems thinker who showed us that if we stop having reductionistic linear thought and move to systemic whole systems points of view, guess what? Our models work better. So all of these are revolutionary thinkers, and there are many more that we could include, but every one of them challenges the dominant narratives of their day and invites a very different way of thinking. And so as the old world dies, we need to be this kind of revolutionaries, people that are constructing a new paradigm, an ecological living systems paradigm for the earth and for humanity. And so to be able to live this out, to experience it, to feel it, we need stories. We need stories that are real, that we can touch with our own hands. We can feel them, just like you could feel an apple in your hand. You can smell these stories. You can taste them. And very importantly, we need stories that we can live. We need to be able to live the stories and invite others to live the stories with us, to enter into the new paradigm through direct experience. And that's what leads us to the strategy of walking the world with a bioregional mind. What does it mean to walk the world with a bioregional mind? It means you walk the same world as other people around you, but you walk it in a different mental space. You walk it knowing that you're part of a living atmosphere whose oxygen comes from plants. You walk it knowing that the shape of the land creates the contours for the movement of water, the birthing of rivers, and the creation of ecosystems. You walk it knowing that the geography of your mind is the geography of life around you. And when you walk the world in this way, you invite other people to walk in this way with you. You invite them into the story of living, the story of a living planet, the story of a conscientious living being who knows that they're part of the life of this planet. And this way of walking in the world is a revolutionary act. And here's how Penny and I are preparing to do this later this year. We're preparing for our bioregional pilgrimage through the heart of Turtle Island. So we're going to travel to the major headwaters and confluences of rivers in the Mississippi Basin. And our goal is to plant the seeds of bioregional imagination in as many people as we can. We're going to be doing this from May 28th through July 1st. We're going to start in St. Louis, where the Missouri River and the Mississippi rivers meet. Then we're going to go west into the Ozarks. Then we're going to go north up to the Milwaukee watershed and the drainages connected to the western part of Lake Michigan, before we move further north up to the birthplace of the Mississippi River in Minnesota. And then out following the Missouri River out west, we're going to go out to the Badlands and other places in the Great Plains as we journey up to the Central Rockies, near Glacier National Park in Montana, where the Missouri River is born, and then follow our way down to the Silver River, the Platte River, the Arkansas River, following the Continental Divide in the western part of the Great Plains until we arrive at the birthplace of the Red River near Amarillo, Texas, which we're going to follow down to the mouth of the Mississippi in New Orleans, and then make our way up the main channel of the Mississippi to Memphis, a place of tremendous cultural significance in the Mississippi Delta. And then we're going to journey our way out east to follow the Tennessee River Valley out to the Smoky Mountains, and then go north into the Ohio River Valley until we make our way back down to Cairo, Illinois, which is where the Tennessee River has drained into the Ohio that then drains into the Mississippi, a major confluence of watersheds. And then we'll find our way back to St. Louis in the end. So as we're making this journey over the span of a month, we will be walking the Dandelion Strategy into being. We'll be manifesting it by inviting seeds of bioregional thinking to emerge everywhere we go along the way. People will invite us into local community gatherings, to give talks, to sit in community council, to speak with and listen to the rivers as we move across the heart of Turtle Island. And here you can see that this is revolutionary actions taking place, imagining the continent in a completely different way from how the United States, nation state, states of the United States model tells us it's supposed to be structured. We're going to walk in a parallel reality, living in the bioregional imagination of a living continent. While we're doing this, you can join us, or you could organize your own pilgrimage or host a local gathering, whether it's in the Mississippi Basin or anywhere else on Earth. We all can begin to engage as revolutionary activists by living differently and inviting others to do so with us. The invitation here is to live the story of Earth regeneration by being one of the dandelion seeds. It's a way of being. It's a story we live out. And as we awaken bioregional imagination in ourselves and those around us, we are the stories, and we weave the stories about regenerating the entire Earth through a dandelion strategy of 1,000 bioregional learning centers. Maybe you could create one here where you are. And this is revolutionary activism. But then later in the year, we're going to visit these bioregional learning sites in Tunisia, most of which Penny and I went to in the last few weeks with Elias as our guide. Because from September 18th through the 29th, there's going to be a Mediterranean bioregional activation. It will include a pilgrimage to some of these learning sites in Tunisia, where Penny and I will invite people who are creating bioregional learning centers from the design school, a small group, to take this pilgrimage with us and begin to give shape to the bioregional learning center action network that we want to create later this year. Then there will be a 3-day workshop in Tunisia where we'll invite a lot more people to come to catalyze the creation of a Mediterranean hub for regenerating the entire Mediterranean. After this, from October 2nd through the 18th, we'll continue into a Western Europe bioregional activation. That includes visiting bioregional learning centers that are being created. Currently, we have 4 places in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and in the UK, where local teams connected with the design school are already creating their own BLCs. So as we travel, we want to inspire more dandelion seeds to come into being. And you can join us in any of these places during our journey, or you could organize in parallel with us. And that this kind of activism is deeply empowering and very different from voting in a broken election or in protesting ineffectively in a system that's dying around us. So basically what we want to do is catalyze a wave of dandelion seeds. And it works like this. Between now and beginning of November, through this Mississippi pilgrimage and the pilgrimage to the Mediterranean and Western Europe, you can host your own local immersions and parallel activities. So you have 3 options. Option 1, join Penny and me where we are in any of these places along the way, or host your own local gathering where you are during these timeframes, or join someone else's gathering who's not too far from you or who's where you're going to be. So you have lots of options for getting involved and living into this story of revolutionary activism. And at this point, what I want to do is take a break from the presentation and invite Penny to share with us some of the ways that you can do this. So Penny, I pass it over to you.
Thanks, Joe. So what I want to do is first take a step back as you're thinking about what could you do during these immersion times. I want to take a step back and just acknowledge that there are many different people in this learning journey who are on different phases of the journey. So some of you just joined this year. This is your first learning journey in the design school. You're just starting to think about what is a bioregion, what's a bioregioning. I don't even know what this is yet. And some of you may have been in the school for a while, but maybe you're just starting to engage and just starting to think about this. And so at this level, you're probably thinking, questions like, how do I even start? What is a bioregion? What's my bioregion? Um, like, how do I find other people? How do I talk about this? So these kind of like questions when you're just starting. So you might be at that level. You could be that you've been here maybe for a year or two, that maybe you took last year's learning journey and you've been starting to think about what's happening in your area, thinking more deeply about your bioregion, exploring and talking to people, practicing talking about this with people, trying to find others in your region, maybe starting to map some of the processes in your region. So maybe you're a little bit farther along on the journey. And then some of you are actually organizing bioregionally already. Some of you have even created bioregional learning centers or are starting to create bioregional learning centers. So just to acknowledge that uh, we are all on very different points of the journey, and so how we participate in these immersions might be different. And it can range from being something really, really simple, like if you're in your own watershed, you go to the river and you take a few people with you and you sit with the river and you listen to the river. Or you go out in the landscape, you go through a forest. It can be very, very simple like that. You start to just immerse yourself in the landscape. So, what I wanted to do now is just say that, give you some examples of some of the immersions that people have done in the past and that they're planning for this year so that you can start to take a look at the design school platform and get a sense for different ideas of what you could do. And just take a next step. So it's important to get off our computers and get into our landscapes, no matter what that next step is. So, um, as Joe was saying, the first option is that you can join us on our immersions and on our pilgrimages. So we're going to actually be creating a WhatsApp group or WhatsApp or Telegram or some kind of group like that soon with Joe and me in there, and we're going to keep people in that group updated on where we are in the journey. We're posting our itinerary, but we will keep you up to date on a daily basis where we are, so you could come meet us if you wanted at any point on the journey or at any of the events along the journey. And you can also join us in the Mediterranean workshop and any of the events in Europe and so forth. So as Joe said, that's the first option. But I'm going to share my screen now and show you how you might organize your own event. Okay, so first, I want to show you where to find a couple of webinars from last year's learning journey that will be really helpful as you're starting to think about hosting an immersion. So if you're in the left-hand menu, go to the 2025 learning journey here and scroll to module 3. And there's a webinar called How the Design Immersions Help Organize Our Bioregions. And that'll help orient you to this idea of hosting a design immersion and the different levels, like I said, from simple to complex. And then you can also scroll down to Module 8, and you'll see a webinar recording called Dreaming into Regenerative Futures. And this was a webinar where we had Richard Coates and Maria Elena Danes on the session, and they talked about their design immersions that they had hosted. So that's a really good one to watch because the way that they describe their whole process of from the beginning of thinking about it to preparing for it to actually doing it and to the experience itself. So that's a really, really good one to watch. And then you can also find more examples if you go to the Bioregional Learning Exchange. There's a really good one that was just posted the other day, just the second post down in the feed right now from Maria Elena. She's going to be hosting an immersion during the time of the pilgrimages. And if you click into here, this is a more elaborate version of an immersion. It's a 4-day immersion. You can see how she's talking about it, that they're gonna be going to regenerative projects, but they're gonna be meeting the people behind them, weaving them together. How do we sense into this? And having time to reconnect with the land, human connection at the core. So space to integrate. And you can see that this is a much more elaborate version of an immersion, but this is a really good example and a really good model to take a look at. She also hosted one last year, like I said, so you could watch that recording. And then to find more, go up to the search bar and type hashtag design immersions. And you'll see pop up some other examples. So for example, here's another elaborate version that Elias hosted in December, where they did an immersion into the South Mediterranean and the edge of the Sahara, similar to what Joe and I just did. You could see a simpler version, this one, a fuzzy bioregion microactivation, where just a few people came together and went to a river, put their feet in a river. You could see, for example, in Marin Sonoma County, they've been hosting some events, some bioregional immersion events. So type in that hashtag and you'll see many different examples. The Willamette Valley listening tour was a really, really good one. So really you can do anything ranging from simple to very complex, and we're just asking you to do something. Get off the computer and do something in your region. And like Joe said, you can also just go and join somebody else's event as another way to do this. So that's it, and I'll pass it back to Joe.
Thank you, Penny. So you can see that we always scaffold on what we did before, and we have some really great previous experiences by our members. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into the presentation and continue. So, as I said, the way that you can catalyze this wave of Dandelion Seas is to join us in our travels, host your own gathering, or join someone else's gathering. But it's to actually live a different story is what is the revolutionary act. It sounds so simple, but it is truly powerful. So what I want to do now is give you a little bit more of a sense for why bioregional learning centers are a different kind of activism. So when I talk about activism that dreams the new into being and lives different stories, how does a bioregional learning center help you do that? And this is really about the rigor and the robustness of what a BLC can be. So in the last webinar 2 weeks ago, I talked about this visit that we did to the city of Gebes in Tunisia, where there's a phosphate processing plant and the world's largest oasis, and that the natural springs that feed this oasis are being dried out by a factory for making concrete. Basically, they're drilling into the ground, sucking the water out of the aquifer and killing the oasis by taking the water before it arrives to the city. And that the phosphate is mined in the mountains, destroying an oasis on the edge of the Sahara Desert with the pollutants that come out of the water of that mining. And then the phosphate is brought to the middle of the city where they literally dump radioactive gypsum dust into the sea and poison the children of the community. So this is a situation where globalized extraction for a concrete production and for phosphate to make chemical fertilizers for industrial agriculture are doing immense social and ecological harm to the local people. So you can imagine there's a lot of protesting, a lot of activism. And there is. The largest protest in Tunisia's history, or rather, I should say, the largest environmental protest in Tunisia's history, 150,000 people went to the beach of that phosphate processing plant. And guess what? They shut it down for 6 months, but then they started it up again. So basically, the forms of activism that people have available to them are protests and voting in corrupt elections. Now, those protests and that land defense work remains critical. So I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. But now let's look at what can a bioregional learning center do that is different from that kind of activism. Well, first of all, a bioregional learning center does a lot of things. So it could, for example, go back and reconstruct the history of the bioregion, the history of colonial extraction, the different civilizations and invasions, and in particular, related to this situation, the colonization by the French government. Because the French government colonized this place, and in the 1960s and 70s is when this wave of destruction began to occur. This globalized capitalistic extraction was connected with the history of colonialism. So reconstructing that history, creating a deep and holistic story of place is part of what a bioregional learning center does. But also, from that history and from that story, they can conduct a systemic analysis. How do different ecological and cultural sites relate to economic processes, relate to economic development, relate to the past, present, and future of the place, to conduct a systemic analysis of the opportunities, the threats, the challenges, and so forth. This is the kind of work that a BLC might do, including convening local stakeholders in this analysis and creating coherent organizing among them. Organizing that might lead to the imagining of regenerative futures, the creations of alternative scenarios. What would happen if the local people shut down that factory and shut down that phosphate plant? What kind of economy would they want to create for their future? So this imagining of regenerative futures is a very important part of what a BLC can do. And then to step aside from the corrupt dynamics, they can start to create their own funding and governance systems. They can create exchanges in their local economy. They can make collaborative decisions around the agendas that they've created together. And all of this is part of birthing a learning ecosystem, ways of learning and unlearning at the bioregional scale. And so you can see that a bioregional learning center is a way to design the regenerative pathway and live toward a different future. So while the old forms of activism are very important, this revolutionary activism of living into the creation of a bioregional learning center does a hell of a lot more than just connect you with the river. It also gives you profound organizing capacities to transform the power of the local dynamics. And that this is truly revolutionary activism. And that this directly confronts the extraction, the destruction, the dying process, and it composts and transforms it through its multi-year processes to give birth to regenerative futures. So I wanted to give you one example of how a BLC is a lot more than a learning site. It's a lot more than a place to go and study. It is a place to go and study and gather and convene and design and dream and govern and fund into a regenerative future at the bioregional scale. So that's why bioregional learning centers are so important in this form of regenerative revolutionary activism. So we're actually doing this in another part of the world and have been for more than 6 years as we've been weaving toward a Northern Andes hub for bioregional regeneration in Colombia. Some of you know this story well, some of you may not. So I'll just give a very brief summary, which is that in the last 6 years, we've done a lot of things. But in the last 3 years, we focused a lot, Penny and I focused a lot of energy in creating a learning ecosystem called Sueños del Bosque, which is Spanish for dreams of the forest. Sueños del Bosque is a learning ecosystem grounded in bioregional learning processes, and it focuses on children, educating children about the local tropical dry forest, the local craft skills, the restoration of native forests, the restoration of waterways, the cultivation of community gardens and local food, many different things that Sueños del Bosque is doing. Well, it has become really clear to us that we need to think about Sueños del Bosque as a cultural seed, and that we need to move toward creating a bioregional learning center for the bioregion that's the Northern Andes. And that we already have relationships with other territories in Colombia, so we can start to move toward creating a bioregional learning center at the Northern Andes scale. The key patterns for this organizing that we've identified along the way are the major hydrological systems. This is primarily the Páramos, these unique high elevation wetlands that only exist in the Northern Andes, and the watersheds that form around them that create the anchoring of organizing for the ecosystems of the Northern Andes. All of the major watersheds and climatic patterns associated with them that give rise to the different kinds of ecosystems. And then the other key organizing pattern for us is connecting regenerative education between one place and another, starting with regenerative education for children, but then expanding out to regenerative education with adults. So in the other territories, we've already been helping map, or rather they've been doing their own mapping of regenerative education, and we can see obvious ways of creating synergies between local education efforts in the different territories. So this is an example of living the story of birthing a BLC in the Northern Andes, which is already 6 years in, and we're ready to take our next steps. So when you span out to the world and start to see what's happening here, this invitation into living a different story includes our pilgrimage through the Mississippi Basin, the Mediterranean bioregional gathering in the Mediterranean Basin, the bioregional pilgrimage into Western Europe, and then this bioregional learning center and the network of work in the Northern Andes. And I'm just going to add one more, which is the existing landscape cultivator organizing of Cascadia, which the design school is closely connected with, and we're very good friends with the people involved. And of course, there are many other seeds of bioregional organizing and bioregional learning centers. Like, I didn't put it on the map here because of the way this map looks, but the work in the greater Takaranto bioregion is pretty advanced in its thinking about bioregional learning centers. But what you can already start to see just with what I've shown here is that this is a revolution of consciousness, and it's expressed as bioregional imagination. So the Dandelion Strategy reveals that a new world is possible, and that it's already here, and that it's coming. And we live this story into being through parallel organizing this year and onward into the future. And that's a kind of revolutionary activism that I personally can get behind. So a big question for us in this is, how do we finance it? How do we make it work? And I talked about this briefly before. Today, I want to go into a little bit more depth. So we've been working with different kinds of funding pools for manifesting this strategy over the last several years, actually going back to the year 2020. So for 6 years, we have been practicing creating funding pools for manifesting the design pathway for regenerating the earth. And one of the funding pools we created in 2023, when we established the design school, is that all of your membership dues go into a funding pool. And so far, what we've done with those membership dues is we funded the design immersions that Penny was pointing out. Go and look at the one that happened that Richard Coates or Maria Elena Danes hosted, or the one in the Willamette Valley, or the one in Marin Sonoma County, or the one in Barichara, or the one in Tunisia. And the funding of those immersions came from your membership dues. Also, the bioregional activations and the bioregional pilgrimages that we do have been partly funded by the membership dues. And we funded different kinds of stewards of the community of the design school through the membership dues. And now we're ready to move toward the planetary network of BLCs. Well, if you consider every dues-paying member of the design school as a contributor into this funding pool, because literally you contribute money and the money goes into the funding pool by being a dues-paying member, that means we have about 1,400 people who have been design school members. Some have left, some are still here, new members are coming all the time, but in aggregate, there are about 1,400 unique contributors into this funding pool right now. And if you look at the amount of money we've mobilized, which includes grant money, the membership dues are actually a small part of this number, but what you can see is that we're near $1 million. We're at about $975,000 right now that has been invested throughout the last 3 years in everything that's happening through the Design School's extended planetary network. And of course, we created this Active Hope plan about a month ago, where if we can get 50 people to become Active Hope members, we can raise $25,000 because the Active Hope plan is a $500 lifetime membership. So 50 lifetime memberships is $25,000. That will fund the bioregional pilgrimages this year. And we're already at 21. We're almost halfway there. So if you would like to become an Active Hope member, break out your phone, grab this QR code. You can also find it in the School Happenings section of the Design School. But I want to emphasize here is that when you become a Design School member, you get all the benefits of the Design School and your money goes to work supporting the mission. So here's another way that you could contribute if you feel so moved. And you can see that this mechanism of funding ourselves is a really important part of decolonizing the money. So that's something that we're doing. But we have a much bigger vision than that. We have been working on the Earth Regeneration Fund for 1,000 BLCs. And we have a vision of raising at least $1 billion to do this work. If you take 1,000 BLCs and give $1 million to each BLC, which over the span of 5 to 10 years is really a modest amount of money, then we could easily spend $1 billion. So $1 billion is actually less than we probably need for this whole movement. But what we would like to do this year is raise the first $1 million. Like I said, we're already at about $1 million. So we'd like to raise $9 million more. So just so you know, we're working on a much deeper proposal, pitch deck, story, deeper analysis of what's going on with philanthropy to help us raise this larger money. But I wanted you to be aware that we're doing it. And if you happen to want to donate into the Earth Regeneration Fund, you can do so here. But basically what I want to show you right now is the structure of this. Why does it make sense to be able to fund a planetary network? And that we have nested funding pools across 3 different levels. First, there's the planetary level. We pool money into the Earth Regeneration Fund, but then where do we distribute it to? Well, we distribute it into regional networks of bioregions. So we're catalyzing the creation of a Mediterranean hub in September so that the Mediterranean hub can flow money down into the individual bioregions and learning sites within the Mediterranean. Or maybe the Mediterranean is the bioregion, and this is a question for the bioregion itself and how it's defined. But what you can see is that money can move directly to the individual bioregions. The money can move into the regional networks directly, or the money can move into the planetary level and flow across the other levels. But the important thing here is what the BLC gives us, because we're flowing this into bioregional learning centers. And each BLC, each bioregional learning center, creates its own local portfolio of regenerative projects. Who is doing what in the local bioregion? And then it grows its own bioregional funding ecosystem among those local projects. So financial flows within the BLC's network, within the bioregion itself, enable us to create the support structures for learning exchanges between bioregions at this regional and planetary scale, but also it allows money to go directly to local regenerative projects to sustain those local actors in their regenerative work as they're regenerating their bioregion. And that's the brilliance of this architecture and these nested levels of reality, is no matter which level the money comes in, at the planetary, the regional, or the local bioregional scale, it moves to supporting local regenerative projects and sustains the coordination among them through the Bioregional Learning Center, and creates regional learning networks and a planetary network to sustain learning exchanges within and between the bioregions. So I just wanted to share this with you. We've done a lot of work on actually creating this planetary funding pool ecosystem, and we're ready to scale it and invite funding. So if you happen to know people in family offices of foundations, high net worth individuals who are philanthropists, people who are interested in blended finance and impact investing, come and talk to us, because we are ready to look for larger funding. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So now, just to scan back, okay, we have this vision of revolutionary activism in the next few months. We have these different pilgrimages. We have a big vision. How do we tie the logic together across time? And this is sort of a repeat of what I've said before, but I want to reconstitute it and re-emphasize it. That in 2020, I founded Earth Regenerators and wrote a book called The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. Thousands of people learned about this way of organizing. We created the first real-world prototype in Barichara, Colombia. And Penny and I started bioregional activations at the end of 2022. In March of 2023, we created the design school to shift from theory into practice. In 2024, we created the Earth Regeneration Fund. And now in 2026, as everything is maturing and accelerating, we have named the Dandelion Strategy. And we're starting this next wave of bioregional pilgrimages. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes right now to envision and design the structures and the criteria for participating in the Bioregional Learning Center Action Network that we want to give birth to by the end of the learning journey. So by the end of this learning journey and into the end of the year, there will be a BLC Action Network, so that in the next stage, we can create living flows of learning, financial resources, people visiting each other and learning together across a planetary network of bioregional learning centers, so that we can birth bioregional learning centers all over the world throughout the next 10 years, so that by 2030, we've created 1,000 of them. Notice that these are revolutionary acts that help give birth to the new world. We don't just want revolutionary actions like sitting with the river. We need to see the logic of how they connect to a campaign. And the campaign is a 10-year march to 1,000 BLCs, to a planetary network of people engaging in revolutionary story living a different story, living the regeneration of the earth into being in at least 1,000 bioregions on earth. That is what we're doing here in this learning journey and out in the world. So can you feel it? Can't you feel it? It's like it's happening. It's really happening. And it's like we're moving away from the question, how do we design in the time between worlds, to manifesting how we design in places on multiple continents simultaneously, to how we do it all across the planet as a whole. So let's do this. Let's make it happen. And that is the presentation I wanted to share with you today. How we move from understanding the difference between activism in the old world and activism in the new, to the scaffolding of planetary scale transformation. And what it depends on is all of us. It doesn't depend on elite leaders. It doesn't depend on big funders and billionaires. Those can help, They could help if they want, but what it really depends on is enough of us living a different story. And if enough of us do it, all that ego dynamics and leadership bullshit just falls out the window. And I've had my share. I'm sick and tired of the ego dynamics. I'm ready for true grassroots organizing, a kind of activism I can get behind. So what I'd love to do now is open up space for any commentaries and questions that anyone might have, as well as for anyone who's organizing to share more about what you're going to be organizing. So Elias, if you want to talk more about the Mediterranean gathering, or anyone else who's organizing during these time windows that'd like to share more about what you're thinking, just raise your hand and let's talk. Steve, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. I don't think it has to be so much either or. Where people choose to commit their activist energy is really a dispositional thing among people, and we're not going to bring everyone over to the transformational side. And some of us, like I'm running for a Green Party office this year. Some of us are inclined to commit our energy to both, working for reforms within the current political reality, while maybe committing most of our energy to the kind of transformational change that you're talking about. See, the thing is that in my work as a bioregionalist, I find that for instance, within the Green Party milieu, we get a lot of resonance. The green politics movement was actually started by bioregionalists about 40 years ago in this country. And people want to relate to others who can work in both spheres. I mean, working for reforms like a better healthcare system, a lot of people enjoy that. So I'm going to leave it at that and just say that it's not either or. We can be doing both at the macro level and the micro level at the same time. Over.
Thank you, Steve. And I agree with that. And also, I'll just add that what we need is more people aggregating into the Horizon 3 and the scaffolding. So we just need to aggregate directionally. It's an orientation. So thank you for adding that nuance, because I actually agree with everything you said. And thank you for demonstrating and role modeling that for us. So yeah, thank you, Steve. And then Claire, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
I'm realizing I forgot to spotlight Steve, but I'll spotlight Claire. There we go. Sorry about that. Here you go, Claire.
Yeah, I love what you laid out. I think it's so helpful to be able to see that. And I think the thing I just wanted to point to is one of the things that we've realized in doing this program that is in Cascadia. It involves 10 different landscape groups and it's called the Landscape Hub Cultivator. And but one of the things that's really stood out to us as we've been learning together is meeting people where they're at, and getting away from, we should be doing things at a certain level or at a because that also impacts how they approach other community groups. Yeah, so one of the things that we've also focused on is minimum viable process is what we've called it. But what is the minimum that we need to do to be able to hold these next parts of the vision? And I'm just bringing that in because it's been a really good learning, hearing that reflected, and just realizing that it can feel intimidating until you start just breaking it down to where people are at. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And I'll just add a comment that the contexts we each operate in are very different. And so just to name the significance of that. So like if we were there in Gebis in Tunisia, where children are like unable to breathe as toxic fumes go into their classrooms, it's like you can feel that the difference of our context is also going to be really important, which is why the diversity of strategies, contextually appropriate diverse strategies, is super important. And I just want to reinforce that, just say that again, because Claire, what you're saying is really important, and it's naming the significance of contextualizing. So just want to add that flavor, and then onward. Thank you, Claire. And Michelle, over to you.
Sorry, took me a while to unmute. Yeah, it's kind of a similar thing. I've also been a Green Party and an activist, and part of what so we're just nestled in GTB, Grand River watershed. And part of being a learning center is actually, as we collect regenerative activities, to be open at that organizational level, because there's the international work and a lot of people doing work individually, and in terms of getting where we are to there, the organizational change, whether it's municipal politics. There's an election coming right now in Ontario for cities, or whether it's changing organizations. But there's actually, when you talk about room for growth, if depending on how you do your mapping. So we're trying to map and connect, and we include in the definition of regenerations people who are doing transformation at meso, micro, all those levels. So that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michelle. And for all of you who have worked with organizations, the sort of double-edged nature of it, that there's power because there are mechanisms that can create change, and also there's frustratingly deep co-optation of pulling things back to other ways of thinking. And so it's just, it's sort of like, let's celebrate the heroes who go there to work, because it is hard work in that space. I guess what I'd love to do is to ask if there are any other questions or comments right now. Oh, Elias, there you are. Then Elias, I'll just pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I love the presentation, and just wanted to say that, yeah, there are many ways to organize and design these immersions, and the immersion we did together with Joe and Penny, I designed it in the context of the learning journey, regenerating Earth through collapse. So we added some stops in places where we could witness collapse happening, and actually happening for more than 50 years. And people were very much affected. And yeah, we met the people who are protesting. And Joe asked a very good question, which is, okay, after stopping this killing machine, what comes next? And that really helped me understand one of the jobs of a bioregional learning center is to imagine what comes after the collapse, and imagine that regenerative future. And yeah, so I think every immersion should be different and should lead to some yeah, learning and insight and deepening of the bioregional understanding, and the connection with that bioregion, or with the more than one bioregion, like we did in our immersion. We visited the edge of the Atlas Mountains, and the edge of the Sahara, and the Mediterranean, which are three different bioregions, and we could see the connection, and how when we move from one bioregion to another, how the landscapes also change gradually, and to a different landscape and a different culture and different practices. So it's a really good exercise, and yeah, it can have many different and interesting shapes. So I look forward to witness more of these immersions all around the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Elias. May 1,000 diverse immersions bloom. And then Karen, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have been really thinking, so I'm preparing to welcome Joe and Penny to Milwaukee in a couple of weeks, and I've been thinking about immersions as an opportunity to make things visible, or perceivable or noticeable or coherent. And I'm thinking about ways that I have turned my back on my watershed. I live close to the shedding of water between the Mississippi Basin and Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes Basin, um, and there is a lot of marshiness. There is a lot of wetlands that are preserved in these spaces. But I feel like some of the projects that I'm working on, like the Badgerland Biodiversity Corridors Initiative, will ultimately make visible the polluters that are in our watersheds, because we're mapping our watersheds and we're saying, well, water flows downhill, and oh yeah, that farm over there is creating runoff. That's creating problems. And even in the act of mapping these sorts of things, there's some resistance like, oh no, we're going to piss off our neighbors, or there's a political context that this is taking place in. People need to stay in good relations with their neighbors and the county commissioner and all of these different layers um, of that story. And so I'm also thinking about I'm not so much directing the conversation, but creating the context for these conversations. So we're going to be doing a lot of walking along watersheds, walk and talks, and seeing what emerges in the immersion. And I've been learning from so many other people as they've been giving these immersions, and I got to participate in the Barichara immersion a little over a year ago, and getting to kind of see this walking in the world with this bioregional mind, with this vision, and creating the conditions for those kinds of walks and talks to happen.
Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to add a comment to what you just said, which is a great way to learn how to do an immersion is to attend someone else's immersion. You'll just learn a lot. Because what's really amazing, and Karen, you named it so beautifully, is the emergent nature of these immersions. No matter what we plan, much more is going to happen. And the much more is usually deeply insightful and very helpful. So yeah, thank you for that, Karen. And then Penny, over to you.
Hey, I just wanted to respond to a question that Bree asked in the chat to show people where you can post about when you do organize an immersion or an event. So why is it saying that? Okay. You should post those in the bioregional learning exchange space. So I'm actually going to share my screen again and show you. So the bioregional learning exchange is up here in the home area of the menu. And if you're going to post an immersion event, let me know. So send me a little message in the platform and let me know, and then I can give you the permissions that you'll need to post the event. So you would post an event here in the events area, and also a post in the feed that announces the event itself. So, and then use the hashtag design immersions so that we can all search for design immersions and for your immersion. And I just want to emphasize too that it's important to come to the platform sometimes and take a look here, especially now as people start to post their immersions, so that you can interact with their posts and find one that you can join or create your own. So that I just wanted to respond to that.
Thank you so much, Penny. I think it's really helpful to just see it. And then Stephen, over to you.
I loved what Elias said about what you questioned him, what comes next. And I realized one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is this aspect of composting, or flowing money from the capitalist world into the regenerative world. And what I say over and over again is people are going to act in their self-interest. And if you threaten their survival by trying to take away what they have, they're going to hunker down. So the story of what comes next that's inspiring and tickles them where they think capitalism will solve their concerns or their fears is what I think is really important. Like I've spent the last year venturing into the world of people with six-figure incomes or trying to get to six-figure incomes, and I've resisted it for my whole life. And what I found was at least a subset of people who want more money to do more good in the world, but they're doing it in the capitalist way, right? And they don't, some of them were really happy. They went to a retreat and they gathered their money to help stop a forest in Costa Rica from being torn down. Literally, they claimed that bulldozers were ready to tear it down the next day, and they raised a bunch of money to stop it. And the irony that I saw is they didn't understand how they were contributing to that in the first place, right? They used their money for good, but they didn't see how the game they were playing was responsible for what they were then trying to defend. So the more we can show people stories of what else is possible that supports their unconscious need for survival and participating in the existing system, the more important I think it is. And so the people who, if you know people in your community who are playing that game, they're coaches or whatever they are, and they're trying to make lots of money, first of all, if you're like me, don't reject them. Actually get curious about what they want all that money for. And maybe there's some ways that they can express themselves with that money. And return on inspiration and status are things that people often still want as part of the human need for survival. And if you can show them ways that that money could do something great, I consider looking for who might be right under your nose and could help fund your projects.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I just want to add a comment about how powerful it's been for us to create an alternative education offering for families that are collapse aware. So just as an example of people are like, I don't want to raise my kid in the old way when the world's breaking down, but where do you find those alternatives? And that's just a concrete example of what you're describing in general, is the alternatives, the better ways, the more beautiful world that we could live instead.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Joe, because I also see on social media bunches of people who are, homeschooling or don't like the system but don't want to homeschool. So if you're involved with the development of an education center, look at what Joe's doing in Colombia and what can you provide for homeschoolers? Because a lot of parents going to homeschool see the system is not working for them. And again, they most likely have a very limited view of what they're trying to do, or they're making the system wrong without any vision to move towards. So that's a great piece to weave into, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And then Bree, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I can't get on camera in the moment, but I really wanted to, say hello to everyone and thank Penny for the direction. We'll happily post an immersion coming up there. And to Stephen's point, it does certainly relate to the layers of life with the kids, the next generation that are growing up. And ultimately, like we saw in Barichara and what is happening here, and as Karen mentioned, we're stepping into watershed work as a way to immerse, where we're actually focusing and highlighting all of the watershed workers, all the people doing the big, small things here that weave their work together, including the next generation. So my daughter is going to be hosting, all the people that are involved in the immersion are actually hosting on the immersion. And we're doing 5 rivers in 5 days to be able to demonstrate the version of the bioregional learning center that already exists here. It's not under one roof. It's on the landscape. It's with the people. So I will post information for those that want to come join us for 5 rivers, 5 days to visit headwaters to mouth, and then also just really looking forward to seeing you all in Wisconsin when we get down there to visit Karen. I know she's going to come up here for our immersion. We're doing a swap. So blessings to you all and big thanks for the journey.
Thank you so much, Bree. And yeah, anyone who gets a chance to go walk the 5 rivers, go do that with Bree and all of her cool friends. Millicent, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me in the design school. I'm sure the Africa story is still pretty much untold, And I just love joining these webinars because they send my mind spinning. Looking at the point about revolutionary protests, and when I look at our context, the level of consciousness is still very low. And even when we started the Friends of Lake Victoria with the kids in 2020, and as we've been going around sensitizing communities, you find the level of consciousness is very low. Extractive capitalism is at its peak in this area. And really, if you keep quiet, then you're going to be totally overtaken. For us, walking away currently is not an option, and we have to rely on the traditional methods of, sensitizing people, then coming out to protest in large numbers. And that's the only way that we get listened to. We have major, major issues with our lake. We live right on the shores of Lake Victoria. And the reason that we even started this work at all is the fact that there's so much pollution, the lake is gone, and the kids' vision is actually to restore the lake to its pristine condition. So we are beginning to tackle issues around the extractive sand mining that has decimated the fish stock. Then there's a grant plan currently to put up nuclear power plants. And talking to communities surrounding the lake, everyone is like, we are not ready. If we cannot manage our solid waste, if we cannot manage our liquid effluent, how on earth are we going to manage the radioactive waste that is coming from nuclear plants? So I think we're way behind in terms of understanding the bioregional concept. But I think we're really trying to come up to speed and do what we know we can do best, because like with the nuclear power plants, we are sensitizing communities so that people can come out and protest. Just 3 weeks ago, we had protests against gold mining. The company that has layers and layers outside the country, then come back in, and you're told it's an investor. Unfortunately, we are crazy about investors. So they come in and they want to evict a whole community. So the community rose up in arms. 3 of them died, but government has actually pulled back because of the level of protest. So we're going to need a lot of help from communities that at least have gotten to the peak of extraction of capitalism and now want to retrace their steps to begin to do things differently. But for us currently, I would say it's survival that is paramount. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Millicent. I'll just add that everything you said beautifully exemplifies what bioregional learning is about, in the sense of, what is the story of your place? How did it come to be the way it is? How is it now, and where does it need to go? And all of the examples you just gave, they show how complex that is, but also how real it is. And that's very important. So I think that what you said about raising the consciousness of just getting people to see that the lake creates a system that connects people, that the movement of water connects people, is a really important, like a root of the tree of bioregionalism in your place, of helping people to see how different small communities are connected to the same hydrological basin. That will actually help you with your organizing to be more effective in the protests, in the education, the work that you're doing, and in cultivating real power. So all of those things, I would say, are very much aligned with what we're talking about here, very strongly aligned. And so we will look for ways to be helpful and to see how we can create stronger sharing of stories and deeper connection. Because that peak of capitalism If you look at it in the United States, most of it's happening with technology and people being distracted by these, but it's still the peak of capitalism. So I think we share a lot more in common with that part of it that we can discover together. But thank you so much for sharing it. It really adds more depth to the conversation. And then David, over to you.
Yeah, so I think regarding survival, a big issue that we haven't touched on is food. Is people have to eat, and we have to find ways of producing food that isn't destroying. It isn't, the regeneration is either enhancing the capacity of the earth to support life or degrading the capacity of the earth to support life. And we want to be on the enhancing side, which means shifting our idea of where food comes from, permaculture practices at a large scale. Cities cannot feed themselves, so it requires then incorporation of the peri-urban landscape, which is with corporate industrial farming practices is just terribly, terribly destructive, as we all know. So I think old school protest and organizing is important, as well as imagining the new possibilities. We have a provincial government that is the most corrupt ever, openly corrupt, even passing laws that make it illegal to investigate their corruption. We got that level of organizing that is absolutely necessary, as well as, but within the framework of imagining what is possible. I think I just wanted to bring up because if we don't feed ourselves and each other, then all our imagination, I don't think is going to go very far.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I'll just add that part of the history of bioregionalism and its long successes is getting people to think in terms of sheds, watersheds, fiber sheds, food sheds, and so forth. And that actually is directly a lineage with the whole history of the bioregional movement. And food is an anchor of coherence or an anchor of incoherence. So I apologize, Peace Foundation, who I don't remember who is behind that account, so I can't name you by name, but welcome to the stage.
Great, thank you. My name is Fred. My name is Fred. I'm from Uganda, on the country of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, yeah. So Peace Foundation means permaculture education, action, and community empowerment, and we are grassroots community-based organization of climate action, addressing effects and causes of climate change through permaculture and communities in climate action. I'm happy that today I've joined this. I think this is my second time. I've cases from Pala talking about Lake Victoria. So I come from the country's border with the DRC Congo, where we are part of the Congo Basin and also part of the Semriki Arbateni Valley bioregion. The challenges he cited are critical and really felt here. And I really feel like integrating in our permaculture the same, but also creating a hub and a bioregion that will engage people like her and others from Congo, so that since we experience the same, we can have a common action of addressing the challenges that affect us. Wonderbojo is a district at the margin of the country, and it is abandoned by the central government in terms of service delivery and also response to challenges that affect the people and the biodiversity. So I really feel great to be here this evening. This evening in my country. I've seen the discussion. This is the right place for us to share and learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, so much, because one thing that we felt when we were in Tunisia was we could feel the expanse of the oasis network of the Sahara that arrives to the Congo. So we could, even though it's far away, we could feel that cultural connection when we were in Tunisia. So I'm so glad to feel it again now, knowing that the biodiversity where you are is extremely important and very strongly connected to the strategies that we're developing. So I'd love to see us develop more of the bioregional organizing of the Mediterranean, the Sahara, and then the various bioregions that are sub-Saharan, including especially the Congo. So I look forward to weaving those threads directly as much as we can.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Joe. And I'm working on a story about the situation here. But now if I connect with her, she's from Buganda, from Kampala, maybe we can see how to weave the Nile catchment, the Albertine, Semriki Valley, and the Congo Basin bioregion as one entity, mobilizing locals and engaging locals into this.
Yeah, I would love to help with that. So let's talk more. Let's talk more about how we can do that.
Thank you,
Passing
Joe.
it over. Thank you, Fred, so much. And Bryce, over to you.
Oh, did you mean Bruce?
I'm sorry, Bruce. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, because I know there's a Bryce as well.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, your last name's Myers, and the Y jumped in my brain. I'm getting
That's
older.
cool.
It happens. Anyway, Bruce, over to you.
Like, I had this crazy idea because you know, I'm considering this Memphis intersection and how to pull that off and what are the possibilities. I mean, there's so many possibilities, but it's like, how do I fit it into that window? But I also, that context is really kind of about bringing partners together that may not necessarily be they work together, but they don't have a common vision necessarily all the time. And so to kind of, I guess, impress upon them the scope of what we're talking about, if an immersion had like a moment where people came together and all of the Mississippi Basin participants or all the people all over the world could do a planetary call as part of that immersion, as a networking kind of like, this is what we're talking about. Anyway, I just had the idea. I wanted to throw it out there because I'm noodling on how to pull all this together. And what a great talk today.
Look at my maniacal hand. What I found with this is that if this immersion, if the pilgrimage in the Mississippi Basin is successful, we will aggregate people into a shared story. And then we could invite them to convene in some way. And so my simple way of doing that is Substack. Anyone who's following me on Substack and becomes a subscriber will follow along. But obviously that is one way. And then joining the design school is another way. And I think among us, we could think of lots of ways. But right now, someone in Montana wouldn't know why they should talk to someone in Ohio. But as we do this journey, the stories, the daily stories that are going to unfold will sort of shock people into decolonization. Like, whoa, I didn't realize that part of the history is connected to this part of the history. But I think that'll start to happen just in the daily unfolding of the story. Because the landscape holds that memory, but that doesn't mean the humans do, as you know. Like, that people may not know their connection between these places, but just taking something like Memphis as part of the Mississippi Delta, and whether it's the Underground Railroad, whether it's the invention of jazz, whichever part it is, like the connections are serious, you know, they're very serious, but that doesn't mean people are thinking of them. They might be like, Memphis, right. I don't even know where that is. You know, they live in Montana, they may not even know where it is. But as the story unfolds about how the history gave rise to the United States, to the globalized system, to the various parts, that I think those very personal connections will be more obvious. But that's why we have to journey. the journeying will reveal the connections. But I love your impetus. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, and the Trail of Tears goes right through Memphis. There's some. I have to really think about like what's there. There's an enormous aquifer that they are protecting.
Yeah, and the Trail of Tears goes right through the middle of Missouri, makes its way to Oklahoma. It starts in Georgia, but also in other places. Part of it in Tennessee, part of it in Alabama. So yeah, it's those kinds of historical connections. You locally are like Trail of Tears. Yeah, there's a little sign for it in our local park, but most people have lost the whole historical context of the significance of it.
Well, it's really funny you said that because it was the Trail of Tears, the place where I was staying, that street went right in front of the place I was staying. The only thing I found related to it was a little sign.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a 12 by whatever, 15.
Yeah, a historical marker on the roadside that you drive by at 70 miles an hour.
Just down the street. You're on the Trail of Tears.
So yeah, good example right there. We're walking on other histories without knowing it. So yeah, Claire has her hand up, so I'll go over to Claire, over to you, and then we'll wrap up after that because of time. But Claire, over to you.
Yeah, no, what Bruce just mentioned made me want to just bring this in. Is just to say, Joe, I think you have been like really effective at helping us. Just when you wrote like the title of the book, The Design Pathway for a Generating Earth, is it really lays out what is this vision that allows us to even imagine that this is possible, because we're coming from a place that's been deeply colonized. And so what I was referring to earlier, like taking people where they're at, that's really important, but they don't always get to see this larger picture of what are the steps that might make this possible. And I just love this conversation, what was brought up. And it's not rocket science, but there are all these steps that need to happen to fill in how we need to fill that new story in. But yeah, and so just to say how effective it was when you came into doing the activation tour in 2023 for Cascadia, and came in to every community asking the question, how do you activate an entire bioregion? Is that possible? And yeah, just even asking the question plants a new possibility, and just how those two things work. Really, it's really important that they're working together. The North Star of what we're looking to that help align us, but also really critically taking people. Yeah, the conditions don't yet exist for the work that we need to do. We need to create those conditions. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And just as a little comment about that Cascadia activation tour, the very first place we went, which is a place I had never heard of, was called Celila Falls. And it's in the Columbia River Gorge, and it's one of the most important gathering places of First Nations people going back 14,000 years. And of course, I had no idea, like none. And we were welcomed by one of the last surviving members of the indigenous people of that place at the end of their cultural genocide. And when we asked, what does it mean to regenerate Cascadia? That was the depth we were invited to start with. So just to show how emergent and unexpected it can be. Like, I didn't know what Celila Falls was. I had no idea. And then when we got there, I was like, oh my God, this is so profound. Like, I'm forever changed by this. And so there's something really significant about this way of living in the world. And like I said at the beginning, Penny and I were changed by our time in Tunisia. We were there for 2 weeks. We're changed. And we will all be changed by these processes as we do them. And those of you who have done immersions can attest to that you yourself are changed as we do this work. And that is part of the transformation that's needed. So I just want to appreciate that we're 4 minutes over the scheduled time, not that we're too strict about that, but I want to be respectful about that and just say, wow, what a fantastic conversation we've just had. And what an incredible path we're all on. And for those of you who are like, oh, I signed up for an online course, boy, did you bite off more than like we like to joke that our online courses are a Trojan horse to something bigger. Well, it's true. And Trojan horse means something really different to me now, Elias, after coming to Tunisia. Thinking about the Greeks and the Phoenicians and all of that stuff. Anyway, just to say, I feel really connected to the struggles on Lake Victoria, the Nile River, the Congo, because of our time in the Mediterranean and touching the Sahara. And that kind of connection, we can all do that. Have a personal connection to places, even if you've never been to the place, by feeling how a place you go through bioregionalism connects you to other places, because they're connected. The living systems connect them. And that's our job, is to re-stitch ourselves back into the tapestry of life. That's our job as humans right now, re-stitch ourselves back into that tapestry. And if we do that, wow, it's powerful. So thank you for this wonderful conversation. I look forward to meeting several of you along the road as we're traveling in the coming months. And I look forward to seeing pictures of you where you're here and another design school members right there. It warms my heart so much to see you making friends with each other. So please indulge me with photos. Post them to the member lounge of the design school when you hug someone for the first time in this community. And with that said, thank you everyone for a beautiful call, and we'll see you soon because we're going to be out in the world. Thank you, everyone.